somebody took the fake power of attorney from her and stole her home.
If you don't get them out in the first 48 hours, you are in deep trouble.
And then I would say, well, if it's not dangerous, why is it banned in something like 8 out of 10 countries in Europe?
The rest is Spain.
Welcome to the Rest is Spain podcast by the Olive Press, brought to you by Station Expat, where we discuss the issues that matter to expats in Spain. I'm joined by John Clarke, editor of the Olive Press, and Walt Finch, who is the digital editor. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
So I think we have to start with the front page news, which is all about this terrible story of a poor lady who basically had her identity stolen, and somebody took the fake power of attorney from her and stole her home. So tell us more about that.
And it's remarkable. I mean, you couldn't make this up. I've been doing this 20 years now in Spain, Caroline, and I just couldn't quite believe it when I heard about it. And we looked into the story, and bit by bit, it did seem to stack up. And then finally, we spoke to a local lawyer, and we said, have you heard about this before? And he said, you know what? This is the 4th time in the last year.
Shocking.
So it seems that this is something that's becoming pretty typical. So just in a nutshell, somebody somehow abroad set up a fake power of attorney for this woman that went through a notary, and they actually bought the property from her, according to the notary. And then the catastral, which is Spain's official body for regulates all property sales, has now registered that property from this poor woman to somebody else.
Wow.
But how did they make this fake power of attorney? How do you do that? It's not so easy, right?
If you go back, this is something that's going to worry lots of people. So what happened is they had what they thought was a fairly innocuous burglary in their house, and they lost their television. I think she lost a guitar. She lost a few other bits and bobs. But what she didn't realise was they'd obviously copied her passport. They copied the deeds of the property. They copied, obviously, other documents. So she thought, she went to the police and reported what she had stolen and however X many thousands that had been stolen, went through the insurance, did the normal claim, and didn't think anything more about it. Meanwhile, somewhere in Colombia, there are a bunch of thieves who have started to piece together all her information and creating, who knows, they may have opened bank accounts for her. They may have done many other things for her. And, the end result of it is this incredible fake power of attorney document.
That is just shocking, isn't it? I mean, how did this story come to you?
Well, actually, it's interesting that this woman got in touch with us a couple of weeks ago and sent an email and said, I can't believe it. I'm in my house that I don't own anymore, and I've got these guys threatening to kick me out of my house. Apparently, they'd come to her and they'd sent her WhatsApps and sent her, actually dropped a document through her door saying, you need to leave the property or we're going to get one of these disocupas, these anti-squatters groups, to come in and kick you out of this house because it's not your house. Can you imagine how that must feel?
Yeah.
I guess you're not safe in your own home anymore.
Well, we hope we are. So what's your take on this? Is this something that the Olive Press is going to explore further and do a campaign about? Or,
I don't know what you think, Walt. I mean, this is something that, interestingly, when we spoke to Diego, who's the boss of Fairway Lawyers here on the coast, the first thing he said was, we've had 3 or 4 of these cases before. And then I drilled him down a bit more, and he told me this morning, actually, that one of them was in Mexico and involved the purchase of an 800,000 plot in Estepona that someone was buying, and it went through the notaries. And I think the money had been transferred, but somehow at the last minute, they managed to work out that the money had gone to the wrong place, that it was the wrong buyer, it was going into the wrong name, and they were able to reverse it. But he said he's going to have a look further into it. But he said he's heard this from a number of other people, this power of attorney thing.
I mean, questions have to be asked of the notaries. I mean, are these guys in on it? Did we get in touch with the notary for this story?
Well, why do you have to have notaries in the first place? I mean, we don't, in England, if you buy a property, do you use a notary?
I've never met one in England. This doesn't exist.
I mean, they do notarize documents in England. I mean, it does happen, doesn't it? But I mean, when you buy a property in England, or I'm assuming in Germany, and I'm assuming in Holland, and I'm assuming in France, you buy a property, you don't actually have to have this extra element of security. I mean, so why do we pay notaries for for these documents? I mean, how many times have you had to go to a notary here, you guys?
Oh, all the time. A lot of bureaucracy here. And also I'm wondering how this could possibly happen, because even, for example, I know someone I know was getting their NIE number, and there's a lot they had to do to get that, just a NIE number.
It's
To actually steal somebody's whole identity here. I don't know how that's quite scary that they've done that, and copy the deeds. Deeds are many pages long.
I mean, is identity theft, would you say it's growing? I mean, isn't that one of the biggest crimes now in the kind of the modern world?
I guess the criminals are ahead of the law enforcement, as they normally are, to be honest. And they figured out that here's the loopholes. They can get in and they can, steal people's identities, get their bank accounts, get their homes. And eventually in 5 years, they'll tighten up the laws and then they'll find a new loophole. That's the cycle of criminality.
Yeah.
I mean, this woman, she came to us. She's staying in the house. She's saying that I'm not going to leave. But do you think there would be other people who might just go, okay, fine, I'll leave?
I don't know.
Yeah, you go to the lawyer, wouldn't you? You say, lawyer, help me out with this one.
What is she actually doing now then, apart from raising awareness? I mean, how can she take this forward? Is she going to pursue this legally, or?
She is indeed. She's got a lawyer involved. She said it's an expensive process. She wouldn't say how much it was costing her,
Right.
but one can imagine that it may be tens of thousands. It does beg the question, could the lawyer be involved? I mean,
God.
I don't know. But isn't that a horrible thing? And she's actually, I think, 6 months pregnant or 5 months pregnant.
Yeah, that's part of the story. I saw that. But this kind of story for us it's not it's one of our most common thematic stories, property fraud in the Costa del Sol especially. And just this weekend, while I was at a Spanish communion, having a nice time with friends and family, I got a text from an old story we did last year. Do you remember the German couple who had their house stolen because the mother had Alzheimer's?
Oh,
So they came back to me this weekend with more information on this one, and the news previously until the weekend had been very positive. It seemed like the law had caught up and had wisened up with what the scam was. So this man had come to the house of the couple. The father, who's compos mentis, was out for some reason. The mother was home alone. The scam artist knew about this, knew she was alone and vulnerable, sat down in the house because they knew each other. They had dealings before. And he, with his kind of charming snake words, convinced her to sign away the deeds of the house.
That's simple.
Or he convinced her to give him the right to buy it for 100,000
Right, okay.
euros when it's worth, I don't know, much, much more than that. And then the couple came back the next day or the next same night, I can't remember, and they found the locks changed, alarms installed, and the house was no longer theirs. And they're still out now, still living with their daughter. And it seemed the police were on the side. It seemed they were going to evict these guys, and it recognized there was fraud. But then a separate court has now granted permission for these fraudsters to sell the very house they're talking about. So they're back to square one, basically. Even if it's like one section of the system recognizes the crime, and then the courts don't recognize it. Like they don't talk to each other,
It's like property fraud, as you say, is a really hot topic here. And there are too many people who come and don't get the right advice and get caught out. I mean, if you go back, do you remember the Priors in Almeria who had that house and got a license for a house, and then the license rescinded, so they just turned up and got the house?
Yeah, I mean, that is just awful. And talking of these stories that are really heart-touching, I think it kind of is a parallel to the Nolotil story that you've been talking about for years now. There's just so many people in Spain that have been prescribed this drug. And I know you've done a big story about that. So tell us a bit more about the history of Nolotil and how that's been administered in Spain to people.
Well, we'll explain how the drug works or doesn't work. But I should say that we first heard about it in 2016 when we had the family of a victim contact us and said that they'd lost a loved one who died having taken this drug. And having done their research, they realized it was dangerous and that it affected him in a bad way. We researched it, and sure enough, it did seem to be having side effects on British, Irish, Northern Europeans, Scandinavians, having quite serious effects. So we ran the story. If I remember correctly, on the front page, within about a month, we had 2 or 3 other victims came forwards, to the point that we ran another story on the front page later in 2016. And it just gathered steam. And we just realized that there was a lot more people affected by this than anyone knew about. I mean, it was being made by a big German company. And so, of course, it's been brushed under the carpet as best as possible. And we realized that in 2017, we came across a woman called Cristina Del Campo, who was also compiling victims. And so we kind of teamed up with her and we started working with her. We sending families to her, and she was representing them in these kind of patient victim groups. And it kind of gathered steam from then. In fact, later in 2017, we actually launched a campaign to have Nolotil banned, or at the very least have a warning on it. But I mean, can you explain a little bit about how this drug works?
Well, it's not straightforward. It is quite controversial because Nolotil, for Spanish people, it's the most everyday drug you take from infancy. It's like Calpol, I guess, in the UK. For them, it's just a trusted drug that has, never done them wrong.
Painkiller drug, isn't it?
It's painkiller, yeah. So for any kind of ailment or whatever you have, you take Nolotil. And then these people started saying, wait a minute, this is kind of sometimes killing tourists. And it was always...
So strange.
Yeah, it seemed like it was targeting tourists, which how can that be? That makes no sense. Yeah. And the other controversial aspect of this whole Nolotil campaign is that there's no definitive science that backs up the claim that it's hurting, so let's say, blonde-haired, blue-eyed types of people. But the correlations are enormous. I think we've calculated that at the minute, at least 40 deaths, not even injuries, deaths in the last, I guess, 10 years, let's say, from people who took Nolotil with an innocuous injury. Maybe some guy fell off his bike, for example. One guy was playing golf. And they take Nolotil and then they develop organ failure and then they die.
Sepsis.
Sepsis, yeah. And there's no direct smoking gun pointing to Nolotil, but just the correlation is enormous, which is why a lot of Spanish people and there's a lot of resistance to the idea that this is the culprit, I guess there's also a sort of pharmaceutical incentive not to point the finger either. But it's been quite a struggle to get recognition or to get acknowledgement of what's going on.
Yeah. Does it not kill your red blood cells?
Yeah, it reduces red blood cells that affects your ability to your immune system, and then you
fight infections.
You get sick.
And then you get some granulitis, I think it's called, or something. And then, but very quickly, if you're not in a conditions like in a hospital, very quickly you can drop from being relatively unwell to being extremely critically ill. And you say 40 deaths. I think I would beg to differ. I think it's over 100 now. And it has been amongst, as you say, sort of Anglo-Saxon blue-eyed, blonde-haired characters, and that seems to be the makeup that's affected. And it's not just us saying it, because eventually the authorities in Spain have actually put a warning, have forced the medicine makers to put a warning on the side of the drug.
I think in 2018, there was a directive from the Junta de la Nación or some governing body saying, don't give it to tourists. But the majority of medics or nurses just didn't know about it. So it wasn't that the advice wasn't there. It was the awareness was out of touch with the reality.
Yeah, I think they said you can give it to tourists, but only under clinical conditions. In other words, you've got someone in hospital, you're monitoring them, you can see what happens to their white versus their red blood cells. And then because not everyone's affected by it. You might take it all and be absolutely fine.
It seems strange a drug can, only affect a certain race. Never heard of that before.
There's some genetic, I mean, I wouldn't even begin to want to explain it, but some genetic, something that we have in our DNA, if you're sort of North European, that doesn't exist.
Okay.
But we should probably ask the German drug manufacturer, is it Boehringer? We should probably ask them to come on and try and explain the other side of it, because they argue that it's not dangerous and they continue to say it's not dangerous. And then I would say, well, if it's not dangerous, why is it banned in something like 8 out of 10 countries in Europe? And why is it now being sanctioned in Spain, finally, for Northern Europeans or tourists? So clearly it is a drug. And so anyone listening, Nolotil, it's called. If you ever turn up in hospital, your loved one's in hospital, and you see someone being given Nolotil, think twice. Remember, ibuprofen, we're not being paid to say this, but aspirin, ibuprofen, whatever, other painkiller drugs, use those first.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And that's where the journalism that you guys do can really help educate people here in Spain. And actually, didn't one of your journalists win an award for this?
Yeah, we've got well, now she's sadly left us, but Isabel Boston, she won Trainee of the Year from the National Council
Of training a journalist.
Training Journalists, yeah.
NCTJ. It's the best, the top award in the UK, actually.
Great.
It's a benchmark for journalism in the UK. She won trainee for a number of different stories that she did for us, not
Right.
only this Nolotil one, but this is probably her flagship. Because she was doing all the investigation for us for at least a year into Nolotil, and she did a lot of great stories. And yeah, she won the award. It was her award. Well, after we're very proud of her.
I mean, I think I should add that you're talking about a British journalistic award of excellence award that any journalist should have shorthand, should have media law, and should have what's called an NCTJ certificate. And that is really important. And we try only to employ journalists who have that certificate. It's very, very important. And she was singled out from all the journalists in England. I should point out on the shortlist for the final 3 was a journalist from the Times newspaper and also a journalist from the Express and Star, which is, I think, 11 different newspapers in the Midlands coming out of Wolverhampton around there. So for her to win this award coming out of Spain, being trained in Spain, look, bear in mind, she left university and came straight to us in Spain. And the likes of Waltz and Dilip, our news editor, and I hope we put her through quite a rigorous training and got her to this position where, you know, she's got this award. And I, as Walt says, you know, the campaign against Nolotil, she continued. We launched it in 2017 and it continued. And she, if anything, increased it to the point that eventually the drug was effectively taken off the shelves. So, you know.
Fantastic. And I mean, you know, this kind of journalism, another story that interested me was the one about the hotel in Almeria, where it wasn't just something that just comes up. You guys are researching for a long time. You guys are covering these stories time and time again. So can you just explain a little bit about this demolition story?
This is the Algarobica Hotel in Almeria.
Yeah.
You couldn't make it up. And anybody who's driving down through anywhere from Valencia or from Barcelona down towards Andalusia or vice versa, just take a detour to Cabo de Gata, because not only is it famous for spaghetti westerns, it is the most beautiful corner of Spain. It's a national park. It's hauntingly beautiful. The beaches there are some of the only beaches actually on the whole coastline in Spain that are unspoiled, are actually not built on. They're heavily protected, which is why it makes this story all the more remarkable. Because at some points, the Junta de Andalucía changed. This is in the dark days of the Junta de Andalucía. I should point out they're better now. I hope so. But they changed the zoning from C2 to D2 for this area in the park, which somehow meant that Carbonaras Town Hall could give a license to build a 411-room hotel over 18 floors, actually on a beach that has no other buildings on it apart from one small farmhouse in the hills. Yeah.
Wow.
You couldn't make it up almost, but it's incredibly when eventually locals and the local environmentalists and Greenpeace realized what was happening, they went to the courts, said this is clearly wrong, this is not meant to be built on, this is a protected beach. The courts said, yeah, we can accept this, we'll start investigating. Guess how long it took for them to actually come to a ruling?
I would say at least a few years. What do you think, Walt?
3 years. 3 years it took them, by which time it was 95% finished.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it is quite beyond belief. And so it was in 2007, we launched in 2006, 2007, we got in touch with Greenpeace and we met the head of the chairman for Spain and went down there and reported on it. And since then, we called it the El Horrible rather than Algarobico, which is a bit of a mouthful. And it really is horrible. And we must have reported, I don't know, 20, 30 times on the kind of, you know, the changes that have gone through the kind of draconian changes that have happened. And it is now, thankfully, fingers crossed, as we speak, they might have finally decided they're going to knock it down. They have decided they're knocking it down.
Okay.
They might start the demolition process imminently. They say before the summer. So,
But I think there's still a few little issues to iron out, because the last thing I heard about this, they had this, how big is it? How many floors? How many rooms?
18.
absolutely enormous illegal hotel that never was used, no one made a profit from it. So the people who built it refused to be the ones who demolished it.
Okay.
Basically, there was a lot of buck passing. Well, who's actually going to pay to demolish this, one of the biggest buildings ever built in Spain? So this has been what's been holding it up for the last, I don't know how many years.
Well, it'd be interesting to see what actually happens with that. So I'll look forward to reading about the demolition when it happens.
Walt's right, actually, because the courts ruled that it has to be knocked down. And in fact, this is the thing. The central government said, we'll knock down half of it if you, the junta, knock down the other half of it.
Right.
And of course, you've got the socialists in power in Madrid and you've got the PP in power in the junta. So
we don't get along that well.
You might see half the hotel, I guess, though.
And what's the sign on it? Hotel Illegal or something? Illegal hotel?
Greenpeace turned up. I don't know how much paint they got hold of. It can't have been very environmentally friendly thinking about it, because they painted this enormous sign, circular sign that said Hotel Illegal.
Right.
And then the company Azarte del Sol got a sense of humour, because they came in and they got a whole load of paint and then painted out the eye, so it said Hotel Legal.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. That's hilarious.
That went around the world, and so anyone globally would know that this was one of the worst abuses of the Spanish coastline, and so let's fingers crossed that it finally gets knocked down.
It's also a funny one because it's not fraud as such. No one's run away with all the money in this one. It's just like a clown show, really,
Well, I mean, it technically, so Azarte del Sol, who bought the land from another company,
So they-
technically got a license. So they've not, according to them, they've not broken the law, because they got a license from the town hall to build this hotel. But the town hall they'd say it wasn't our fault, because it was in Sevilla where they changed the zoning from C2 to D2. So it was obviously somebody, a draftsman or an architect in the junta in Sevilla in the late 90s, who somehow, wasn't thinking and just changed the C to a D. I mean, we can all do it, right?
Now, we're going to take a quick break from talking about the news to hear from our sponsor.
Sorry, no hablo español?
Looking for travel insurance you can understand? StaySure have been the experts in travel insurance for over 50s with pre-existing medical conditions for over 20 years. Get a quote today at staysure.com or call us free on +34 900 861 023 for a policy in plain English.
StaySure Expat is a tied agent of Ergo Seguros de Viaje.
And I wanted to sort of touch on something that's really topical for expats. It's all about this tension to do with Spain and foreigners. And there's two stories, and one of them is one you reported on, actually, which is you called Foreign Invasion Census Trends. 20% of people in Malaga are foreign, and Brits are the majority of those. And in Benavides, that's the richest and most foreign municipality in Spain. I mean, we're foreign, we live here. I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's 60% of Benavides, isn't it? Are
Yeah.
foreigners. Actually, Marbella is 37%, and you go to Javier in Valencia, it's like 40%. Actually, I think in Madrid and Barcelona, it's higher, right, Walt?
The figure I have on the top of my head, or off the top of my head, is 25% in Manila, which is actually relatively low.
And they're all Brits.
Barcelona, the numbers always change, and people don't register. But yeah, it could be half. And there they have huge problems with housing, with too many people trying to live in one place, basically.
Yeah.
And a lot of those are foreign.
Yeah, and a lot of them buy properties and then, of course, do them short-term lettings, Airbnb them. It's logical, isn't it? I mean, that's how you make a business rather than, long-term rents, and people are terrified of getting squatters. And, given how many stories we report on it, I can sort of understand both sides of the coin, really.
I think it's been 2 years this month, almost to the day, since they made the new housing law, Ley de la Vivienda,
Oh, yes.
2023. And this has been blamed for a lot of the problems in Spain, because the socialist government, they like to champion the people, they're the workers. And of course, most of us are workers, and we're all people. But they've made this law that's very favorable to tenants and the working man, which is quite nice of them. Well, the result is that you can't evict your tenants very easily if they stop paying the rent, and you can't even stop paying the bills. You can't leave them without electricity or water. So you keep paying thousands a month for their bills while they live the life of Riley, and you don't even get anything in return in the way of rent. So it's a catastrophic process for a lot of people.
How long is it taking generally, Will, to get people out?
If you don't get them out in the first 48 hours, you are in deep trouble.
Well, 40 or 72 hours, it's something like that.
I think it's 48.
If someone does it on a Friday night and you happen to wait for the weekend, you get back on Monday, is it too late?
I think so. And they change the locks, and then you can't go, kick them out forcefully. That's illegal. You can't deprive them of a home, especially often these. Sometimes it is just unlucky, unfortunate people, but you also get professional squatters. And then they have women and children, or like a pregnant woman or 2 children. Once they're in there for 48 hours, you can't get them out.
But then aren't they depriving you of a home, by taking you home?
Well, it's kind of communism, isn't it? They take you home and live in it and not pay rent, and you're trying to, you've probably got a mortgage, right?
Yeah.
And as Wall says, you're paying the utilities, so you're out of pocket. And as I understand it, to answer my own question, it's taking sometimes 2 to 3 years to get people out.
Years and years and years. But then on the other side of the coin, I do believe that, is it 10% of the housing stock in Spain is empty? It's owned by banks. It's not private property. It's owned by banks and financial institutions, and they don't pull a finger out and they don't do what they need to do to flip it into something habitable. So there's
18%.
It could be more.
Read even just this weekend, it was
It's in it. That's almost 1 in 5 houses is just empty.
Yeah.
And so I think if you're a squatter, if you're someone is in hard times, if you can get into one of these houses owned by the bank, not really hurting anyone. But obviously, what does happen is that homes, especially on the coast, where the second homes, they get squatted, and then they stay in, and often they trash the place as well.
I mean, we had the other day,
yeah,
our office here, we had some people coming around, walking around, having a look, and they were clearly scoping the joint, knocking on doors and asking, "Oh, is this a Hess door?" Clearly isn't.
Looking in the window.
Yeah, and then there was a girl with a Ukrainian car, and she presumably might have been the tenant. I don't know exactly. But I do remember in the lockdown in Casares, I lived up the coast in Casares, we had a series of squatters moving into the houses there. And this woman and a guy came around, they were driving around, and no one was meant to be in the streets, by the way. You were only meant to be allowed to go to the supermarket once a week or whatever it was, And they were driving around and they were clearly looking to see which houses were empty or not. And so I confronted this guy. I said, "Well, why are you here? You don't live around here." That was the law at the time.
Yeah.
She went absolutely crazy with me, came out and started screaming, "How dare you tell me what to do? I just came down to the beach to have a look around." And I mean, it was so obvious, Eastern European, it was so obvious that they were checking houses. And
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, and things will have to be done to improve it. And it also, coming on from that story about all the foreigners in the region and in Spain, there's still a lot of tension that came up with the UEFA Europa League final in Bilbao, where there was a lot of backlash about British tourists. So you actually went there, John.
I think it's time to put on my hat.
I
don't think Walt will like it very much, being a Manchester United fan, but I'm going to put on my hat. Luckily, our technician here, Keith, is also a Spurs fan, so
we know which
he's still
side
smiling as well, which is great.
you support. But you were there. So what really happened in Bilbao?
I was there. I have to say, first of all, I just listened to another podcast. Do you ever listen to the News Agents podcast? Have you heard that? So Emily Maitlis and John Sopel. Well, John Sopel was missing on the podcast on Friday, and right at the end of the podcast, they suddenly said, "Oh, we've located John. He's somewhere in Vitoria in the Basque region." He came on and he was like, "Hi, I'm reporting here. It's very quiet. I've lost my voice. And yes, by the way, I am a Spurs fan." But yeah, I mean, more seriously, it was obviously a wonderful win for us, and I'm delighted. But I was there decided to get on the Monday so we could report on it properly for the Olive Press. And so a lot of the videos I saw people put up, people peeing in the street, which is obviously disgusting, and breaking this traffic lights. Well, that made a big story all around the world, but I happened to be at this junction. The traffic lights broke because 2 guys exuberantly got up, climbed up the lamppost, and the thing fell over. Both of them fell over. So they started carrying them around. But there was no malintention there at all. And it was quite clear that the people, these were Spurs fans, they were obviously pretty drunk and having fun and singing. The riot police turned up at a certain point at about 9 or 9:30, and I could not fault them to a T. They turned up, 3 van loads of them. One of the vans emptied out about 7 or 8 of these guys with full riot gear, batons, and they stood about 50 yards away, and they just watched. And within the next half an hour to an hour, bit by bit, people just started drifting off and they just started behaving themselves. And it was so clever the way they did it. It was, when I'd seen football games in the south of Spain, in Seville, I'd seen crowd trouble a number of times where the police are looking for trouble. But these guys in Bilbao handled it perfectly.
Well, that's,
And I should also point out that the mayor came out 2 days later and he said it's an 8% tourism in the Basque region. And he said for Bilbao, it was the biggest gift ever. People turned up there. There were 8 arrests over 3 days, 8 arrests. The amount of money that was spent was incredible. He said a couple of traffic lights got broken. Have you any idea how many millions and millions this brought to the city? How much joy it brought to our local fans and how much joy it brought to people here. So it was, that they were delighted. So, there was a bit of trouble in San Sebastian. Well, that's an hour away. So,
But it was football fans from England, from Manchester United and Tottenham causing the trouble. So it's one of those things, as a digital editor, we had to kind of make a few judgment calls as well, because we were getting these videos of English football fans kind of semi-rioting, not rioting, but fighting in San Sebastian. We had videos of like an old man in Bilbao kind of jabbing a stick at these kids who climbed onto his the scaffolding outside his balcony.
So funny, It was lovely. Oh God.
There was one naked guy dancing on the scaffolding, and he's like, at what point is it funny, and what point is it
good point
disrespectful? And there was another very funny video, I got to say. I think it was live TV from some Basque channel, news channel, and the camera's panning around, and somehow it focuses on a guy urinating in the street in the middle of the crowds. And this is live TV. So the news for a buzz like, cut.
They could have put out more portaloos, perhaps.
Yeah,
If you wanted to ask, how could they improve on the situation? More portaloos, I don't want to fault the fan zones because they're really good, but they could have been slightly better organisation. Certainly from midnight until 7 a.m, where were the night buses?
Yeah.
Where were the trains, night trains? Where were the taxis? Because it was almost impossible to get them. I mean, luckily for myself and my son, we were out till about 5. So, we kind of only had an hour and a half wait for a taxi, but there were some people who waited 5 hours.
What did you do all that time, John?
I don't remember. I know I'd lost my voice.
Yeah.
But I think English. I think it's good. Any fans anywhere in the world are going to have lots of fun, especially when they've been drinking. There is some crowd trouble, but I think English fans now are so much different to English fans were in the 70s and 80s. I think we're much better behaved, perhaps better behaved than German fans, better behaved than Italian fans, possibly even better behaved than Spanish.
I mean, it's a very good point, because in Italy, for example, they have the ultra culture, which is extreme hooligan football fans who go around, and many times when British fans go to Italy, there's a stabbing.
Right.
So it is a different, it's another level of football fan hooliganism. And the English fans, sometimes they're a bit loutish. They drink a lot, they sing. They're a little bit obnoxious. But the old school hooliganism that we saw in the 80s, long gone.
8 arrests says it all right. And then when, in fact, the Liverpool-Tottenham final in 2019, you've got even more than 80,000 this time. There were 100,000 last time. There were 9 arrests in Madrid. So I think it says it all. I mean, we're not misbehaving like we used to. In fact, the fans in Bilbao, a lot of the locals were saying how great the English fans were. They said when Roma had come in the quarterfinals, they said they turned up, they were like Nazis. They said they were in black shirts, like you two today. But they said they were doing salutes. And I said, but isn't Roma a kind of left-wing club? Isn't it Lazio that's a sort of far-right club? And they were like, yeah, but they came in and they were really aggressive and they were really not pleasant. And so it's actually a breath of fresh air having the British fans.
That's what we don't see. You just hear these stereotypical comments, and then you might see one video of some loutish behaviour and it's blown up, isn't it?
I mean, there's also trouble in Sevilla. I think Real Betis against, I can't remember, some Italian team. This was just now, like 4 weeks ago. And there was proper fighting. But the problem is, it doesn't get the traction as it does when English fans cheer.
It's so true. You know what happened? West Ham were playing in Sevilla, if I remember correctly, 2 years ago. I think it was the semi-final of the conference, which I think they went on to win. And the night before, Frankfurt had been playing against Sevilla, if I remember correctly, or it was the other way around, Sevilla or Betis. The German fans hung around for the West Ham fans to arrive and then attacked them. basically, it was the German fans who caused the trouble, and everybody told me that this was the case. So clearly the West Ham fans, who have a bit of a reputation, were definitely not looking for trouble.
But I think also now there's a perception. So there's the perception that English football fans are hooligans. I think they're not anymore, but because they're perceived that way, the clubs that now have the hooligans, such as Frankfurt or Lazio, they go looking for fights with English fans, and then the English fans get the blame for it.
And they will, if they start doing that, they will end up getting trouble because the English fans will rise to it, and they don't like it. I mean, you can see what the Brits are like when they do get attacked.
Absolutely. But where do you think this puts the reputation of the British in Spain, Alan?
I mean, we didn't want to fan the stereotypes when we're trying to do our coverage. You want to be fair and accurate, and it's easy to, especially when you're trying to run an online business, you do need eyeballs and clicks and traffic. Yeah. And you do know that if you put certain videos online, that's going to get the eyeballs, but it's going to get the outrage. And it's kind of outrage bait, they say. And so we were, I'm in an iron because we didn't want to feed stereotypes, because Brits have relatively bad reputation in Spain.
Well, I was going to say, if you look at, let's say, Benidorm or Torremolinos or Playa Las Americas, surely in many ways, the way the Brits are when they go to these resorts or stag weekends or holidays with their mates, tops off, and, they're doing exactly the same, if not worse, than all these football fans who, if anything, have really saved up for these trips, who are there with their families. So land trips. I mean, it's interesting, I'll tell you this. When I was at the Mail, I did a story called Holidays in Hell, and the Mail worked out we're going to do a story in the 6 worst resorts in the world. Can you guess how many were in Spain?
Ooh, 5.
Correct.
Oh, really?
Can you guess which one wasn't?
Oh, someone in Greece, Ayia Napa.
Ayia Napa, well done, exactly. So, of course, because I was based here, they said, look, can you do a few top and tail? Can you do a write-up on each of these 5 resorts?
Well, that must have been a fun project.
I didn't have to go to them, thankfully. It was even more fun because I didn't have to go. But you can name them? Do you reckon you guys can name them?
The resorts?
Halfway there. Benidorm, that one in Tenerife, and Playa de los Cristianos.
Yes,
Americas.
Correct.
Yeah. Playa de las Americas.
Playa de las Americas.
It's the same one, right?
Could be.
Salud. Is it Salud? Yeah.
There's all the students going, yes, down south.
Actually, you missed out Torremolinos, but 2 of the worst, San Antonio and Magaluf.
Magaluf.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So what joy, eh?
So on that note, I think, that was a very interesting conversation about the reputation of Brits in Spain. But it's not all like that, though, is it? As you know, there's a lot of different stories and a lot of different ways of looking at this.
So it's funny, on my weekend I was with lots of Spanish people, and some of them are football fans, and one of the topics obviously was the Bilbao, the Europa League final, and they as the English person, they kind of look at me like, why do you do this? Yeah. And I got a sense of how it must feel to be a Muslim when there's a terror attack, depending people. We're not all like that.
I think we've got this sort of tiny little chip in us somewhere that's always sort of fighting to come out, and most of us most of the time keep it well locked up, but every once in a while it does come out, and we need to let go. I think that's the sort of Anglo-Saxon culture a bit, isn't it?
Culture's much more placid. I mean, they're quite fiery in their own way, but they don't break things and
not like Americans or Canadians or Germans, actually Germans can be the same. Northern Europeans, like Scandinavians, we sometimes we just sort of let go, I think.
Let loose.
But I don't. I'm talking about myself here.
Not anymore.
But I think what was really apparent when I was in Bilbao was that we teamed up with a bunch of local Spanish and Basques who took us round the city. And they were just saying how nice it was that we were talking together, and how nice the English fans had been. We ended up in a nightclub. You asked this question earlier, Walt, so I'm going to tell you. We ended up in a nightclub at 3 a.m, and on the dance floor. In fact, when we came in, there was 3 or 4 of us with Spurs shirts on, and we came in as about 7 or 8 Manchester United fans. And I thought, oh God, this could get a bit. But actually, they were fantastic. And when the Smiths came on and they played This Charming Man, there was all of us together going around singing to the Smiths. This guy had a Manchester United flag with Casemiro on it, jumping around the dance floor. It was brilliant, and the Basques were saying how lovely it was and how they hadn't seen any trouble. So I think we're learning. I think we're growing up as a race, perhaps.
But do we still have image management issues? things are better in reality, but in perception, I don't think there's the same kind of.
Yeah, because what you do hear about are the bad stories, you know. So
Yeah, no, let's blame that on the social media. Let's blame that on the Sun and the Mail. I think the truth is, look, that's why we're here, right? This is Spain. We're here to talk about the good things, and there's so much amazing stuff that goes on. And 99% of people that I meet here are really well behaved, and are here for all the right reasons.
More on British culture in Spain, and perhaps to finalise on a nicer note, it's great to see one of the stalwarts of British culture, M&S, doing so well here in Spain and doing a partnership with you guys. So tell us just a little bit more about that.
Yeah, we're absolutely delighted. They're opening a new store in Granada. I think it's their 5th store. And we've worked with them over the years a number of times. And they approached us and said, we'd like to do a deal both online and through the newspaper. We'd like to promote our new shop, and we're giving you 30% off. So I was like, great, socks, underwear, it's and also a new pair of swimming trunks for the summer. But yeah, no, they've been going since 1884, and they've had a few issues over the years, but they seem to have weathered the storm. And get a copy of the paper or just get a photograph of it online on our digital edition, take it to the shop, and there's your discount.
Fantastic.
I'm sure you get M&S underwear, don't you, Walt?
There's an M&S in Gibraltar, near where I live.
Oh, do you get the food? The food's good though, isn't it?
I don't think that one does food. It's old school.
No, it does. There's a little food section.
Is there?
There's a tiny food section,
I should go then.
yeah.
But it's mostly like kind of biscuits and sort of,
non-perishables.
Yeah, but I don't know. I've been there for a while. But I mean, you must go and get your lingerie from M&S.
I don't get it.
End of that conversation.
Yeah. Good. All right.
No, M&S has its place, and it's a great shop for if you want that recognition of something from home.
Fantastic.
Yeah, best of Britain. I agree. Absolutely. I know we're all suckers, aren't we? That we all we love. I don't know about you guys, but I have to have a PG Tips first thing in the morning.
Absolutely.
And, it's I'm trying to think what else we have that I can't do without. Marmite. I love a bit of Marmite.
Good Jaffa cake.
Good Jaffa cake. Yeah. I wonder. I guess we'd love to hear anyone who's listening or watching. We'd love them to send in what they like, maybe a photo or some suggestions of what what they're missing. Or
British food.
Add in the comments.
In Spain.
Yeah, or in the comments. Put in the comments exactly.
What are your go-tos? What are your go-to foods?
Or your go-to foods, yeah. Or can you can you live here for a certain amount of time where you just forget it and you can no longer need it? Is there a point that is it 20 years, is it 30, or do you always have to have that?
For me, it's just tea. I could probably live without most other British things, but tea.
I remember for Christmas 2 years ago, I got a huge order for Terry's chocolate oranges. Oh, wow. I bought 15 of them.
God bless you.
Well, on that note, on that sweet note, I think we've said enough for today.
So thanks, guys.
Good ending. Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you.
All right, cheers. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot.